Florida-friendly landscaping and the master gardener. I am Lily Browning. I am the Hernando County Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Coordinator, and I work for Hernando County Utilities Department. What is Florida-friendly landscaping? Florida-friendly landscaping is a program that was developed by the University of Florida around about 1994. It was sort of Florida's answer to xeriscaping. Instead of 7 xeriscaping principles, we have 9 Florida-friendly landscaping principles. They are: number 1, right plant, right place. 2, water efficiently. 3, fertilize appropriately. 4, mulch. 5, attract wildlife. 6, manage yard pests responsibly. 7, recycle. 8, reduce stormwater runoff, and number 9 is protect the waterfront. We are going to break this presentation up into 3 parts for length of time. So part 1 is going to cover principles 1, 2, and 3, right plant, right place, water efficiently, and fertilize appropriately. What are the advantages of Florida-friendly landscaping? Well, it's a smart way to landscape. It also can be very beautiful. It preserves Florida's natural beauty, and it cooperates with nature rather than fighting against it. It is also the first line of defense. First line of defense from what? From pollutants that might try to enter our waterways. It does reduce stormwater runoff, which stormwater runoff is very likely to bring pollutants down the street, down the storm drain, and into our waters. It protects our aquifers and our other water bodies. Florida-friendly landscaping protects wildlife, and it helps to conserve Florida's sensitive ecosystems. The first principle, right plant, right place. That is something that is easily said, not quite as easily done, takes a lot of practice. But plants established in the right location have a greater resistance to disease and insects, and they often have a greater drought tolerance. If they are planted where they are meant to be planted, they will thrive on their own and not be susceptible to other problems. We have some considerations when we think about right plant, right place. There are things that we need to do. We need to think, first of all, for ourselves about the plant height and width. That plant, everything in its DNA, it wants it to be the size it wants to be. So we have to study that ahead of time. How big is it going to get? How wide is it going to get? Is this going to be a functional plant where I want to put it? Is it going to run into some power lines? Is it going to fill up an area that it's not wide enough? The area is not wide enough for the plant. Is it too close to my house? Is it going to grow up in my eaves? We need to consider all of these things. The number 1 consideration, though, is probably your plant hardiness zone. The USDA has created these plant hardiness zones for the whole country. And as you can see by looking at the map here of Florida, we, Hernando County, are in Zone 9A. That is very important when we're doing research for plants to make sure that we choose a plant that will be hardy in Zone 9A. It gets very hot and humid here. That's a consideration. It also gets cold. It freezes here. That is another consideration for the plant hardiness zones. Just always try to stick with plants that will do well in Zone 9A. Also, native plants. Almost every native plant you find should do well, but that comes with considerations, of course, too. With native plants, you also got to think about right plant, right place. Just because it's native doesn't mean your microclimate has an area for that plant. Some natives, live in the swamps. Some like it very dry, very sunny. You have to take all of those things into consideration. Also, there's always controversy as to what is really a native plant, what is not a native plant. So they have decided to create a timeline as best as they can that natives are plants known to be here prior to European contact. That way we're fairly sure, they have been here a long time and weren't influenced by human beings who may have brought them in. When you're choosing plants, you should choose low maintenance plants that are suited to your site. Florida-friendly landscaping is not anti-turf, but we like turf to be functional and in a design that makes them easy to maintain in a Florida-friendly way. Again, consider the mature size when choosing your plants. Many builders like to fill up a yard so it looks kind of lived in, but then the plants they put there are going to grow too large. You need to know if it's going to block something or just be in the way. Selection, another thing about selection is you can choose ground covers where grass is difficult to maintain. All the Hernando County grasses that we have here require 6 to 8 hours of sunshine every day, all year long. If your area does not have that, the grass is just not going to thrive. It's just going to die out each and every time you plant new grass there. So, or if it has a lot of compact soil, or if it's under a tree where there is shade and it has a lot of roots, there may just be areas where turf does not want to grow. The Florida-friendly way, instead of fighting with the turf, is to find a plant that will grow in that area. Also, you want to group plants according to their water needs. That's taken right from xeriscaping. The same plant needs, same water needs, you want to put those plants together. Sometimes we renovate our yards using Florida-friendly landscaping. And when we do that, we want to save our healthy plants that are already growing in appropriate locations. And we want to retain as many trees as we can. The trees that are good, decent trees that have long lifespans, and clusters of trees. Don't think you need only 1 or 2 trees. Clusters of trees help keep each other healthy as windbreaks and other ways in which they keep each other healthy. As long as it's not an invasive exotic tree or a problem tree or a weak tree, it's a good idea to keep them. When we're considering renovating, we need to move plants that we have planted that are too close to the wall. Here we have a silverthorn that is trimmed into a rectangle here, but you see how close to the wall it is. That can block air currents and make the plant weak. It also can cause a problem if you ever want to paint your house, or if they need to get to an electrical panel or anything that is located on your house. Keep those things in mind. Invasive plants. If we are renovating our yard, trying to make it Florida friendly, we want to get as many of the invasives out as we can. Sometimes that's an impossible task, but we should at least work at it, especially with something like skunk vine, which is really just there, but we need to keep pulling it and throwing it away so that it doesn't take over our yard. Air potato is another invasive exotic plant. We've actually are winning the war against air potato with our air potato beetle, which you will learn more about at another time. And some of the other invasive exotic trees are the Chinese tallow tree, Brazilian pepper. There is an ordinance against having Brazilian pepper on property you own in Hernando County. You will receive a notice that it has to be removed. Mimosa tree, hydrilla, water hyacinth. Those are all pretty big invasive plants that cause a lot of problems in our area. There's some more skunk vine. Looks a lot to people like kudzu, But we don't have a problem with kudzu in our area, but we have many other type of invasive exotic plants. Let's talk in a little bit more detail about turf. When we are considering turf, we have these considerations we need to think about. Drought tolerance is a major consideration with turf in Florida-friendly landscaping. We don't like to use a lot of water to keep our turf growing and thriving. Shade tolerance. I almost wish no one would even bring up the idea of shade tolerance, because you can see in the next bullet point, every single one of our turf grasses maintained as a lawn with a 3 to 4 inch mowing has to have 6 to 8 hours of sun every day, all year long. St. Augustine Floratam turf might have, I guess you could consider, the best shade tolerance, but it's really better to say it'll take longer to die in the shade than some of the other grasses. That is due to the way we maintain them as a turf grass, as a lawn. Now, Bill and I have stumbled upon some St. Augustine growing wild in the shade right off of the Gulf at Pine Island. It was probably 12 inches tall, and it was the hardiest stand of St. Augustine I have ever seen. But then again, nobody was doing anything to it, certainly weren't fertilizing it. It was getting a lot of water, getting a lot of salt water actually, but no one was trying to maintain it as a 3 to 4 inch big expansive lawn. That's where I believe the difference is. We need to consider how much we're going to be walking on or dogs running on our turf. If you do live on the Gulf, salt tolerance is something you need to think about. Fertility requirements. How often do you want to be fertilizing this lawn? I don't fertilize at all, ever. I have what I have recently stumbled upon a term called a diverse lawn area. I love that term. My grass started out as Bahia grass. There's still a good bit of Bahia grass in there and some weeds. I never fertilize it. But if you live in an area where they demand more perfection in a lawn, you might have to do some fertilization. So think about how much fertilization the lawn you choose needs to keep looking good. We all have different Florida can have different climatic conditions. You can be 80 degrees one day, 28 the next. You need to consider how your lawn can handle that type of activity. What kind of leaf texture are you looking for? You're not going to find the leaf texture that you had up north. Zoysia grass might come close. That's not very popular in our area. It is very popular in the villages. It has that fine leaf texture. And you got to consider each and every lawn, each and every turf grass has pest and disease problems. They might have different pest and disease problems and varying degrees of it, so you need to think about how much you want to deal with it. The least pest and disease problematic turf grass that we have available to us would be Bahia grass. That doesn't mean it doesn't have any, but it has the least amount. It requires the least amount of maintenance from us, but some people don't like that. It's lighter green, has an open growth habit, and it shoots up the seed heads. It's just all in what you want to deal with. Now we're going to have a little quiz. True or false? It is easy to grow certain types of turf in deep shade. I think if you were listening, you heard that would be false. We cannot grow any of our turf grasses in the deep shade. Aloes and impatiens should be placed in the same plant beds. That, again, would be false. Aloes need very little water. They're a very drought-tolerant plant. They're succulent. And impatiens seem to want water all the time. So now we would not want to be putting those plants together in the same bed, because somebody is going to be unhappy and somebody is going to die out. And the third one, if you are working harder than your plant, it is not Florida friendly. And that is true. If you are working harder than your plant to try and make your plant survive, that is not a Florida friendly plant. Florida friendly plants are low maintenance and they learn to thrive on their own. Florida friendly principle number 2, water efficiently. This is how Florida-friendly landscaping fits right in at Hernando County Utilities under the Water Conservation Department. Water is a limited resource, and it should be used wisely. Now, of course, we all know that we have the same amount of water that we have always had as far as the earth. Same amount exists that always has from the beginning of time. But other things have changed. Its availability at certain areas at certain times has always changed. But we also have a whole lot more people than we've ever had before. A whole lot more people, a whole lot more pets, perhaps not wild animals, but a whole lot more pets, all vying for the resource of this water. In Florida, we have very sandy soil, which allows a lot of leaching through that soil. Water goes through it very quickly. If you lived up north and you had a rain, it created puddles that were there for 2 weeks. Now we have a very, very hard rain and the puddle isn't there for 2 hours. So we know that the water seeps right through. The problem is, it takes everything with it that it might be finding along its way. Any kind of pollutants can go right in our aquifer through leaching. Now, in the Water Conservation Department, we like to think about the aquifer as our water savings account. If that helps you imagine it, it makes us feel good when we know we have a good amount in our water savings account. Right now, in August of 2018, I'm pretty certain we have a good amount right now. We've been having quite a bit of rain. In fact, the ground is pretty saturated and it's causing some spontaneous flooding. But that could change. We could have, if it stopped raining today and we didn't have rain for 3-4 weeks, we would be in a much different situation. Things change quickly in Florida. We don't like to overuse our water resources. So hand water whenever possible instead of using your sprinkler. Don't water in the rain, whether by hand or with your irrigation system. That just makes zero sense there. Don't water your driveway. Don't water a parking lot. Don't water the street. Check your irrigation heads. Make sure you're delivering the water where you want it to go. And just so you know, an average Florida resident uses 150 gallons of water a day. That's not on their irrigation. That's their personal use of water. For those of us with irrigation systems, we need to keep an eye on them to make sure that we don't have any problems. Many of our irrigation systems are on in the middle of the night, so you may not know if you have an issue. Like at the top right corner here, we have an Old Faithful going on. What you can do is you are allowed to go out during the day and turn on each zone for about 5 minutes and check out the heads in the daylight so you can see if you have any problems or anything that indicates an underground leak, or if you have heads spraying the wrong direction. There's no need whatsoever to be watering our driveways, or sidewalks, or our streets. That's just a waste of water, and we can just turn those so that they are getting to the plant material. You can use micro irrigation to apply water directly to plant roots, and that also minimizes evaporation and wind drift. And also calibrate. Go out and make sure, see how much water your irrigation system is distributing. Place out some cans, randomly, some tuna fish cans, something like that, and randomly in a irrigation zone for a period of time, and see that if each of the cans is filling up the same amount. That's how you can calibrate your irrigation system. Here is a cutaway of what our aquifer looks like. It's called the Floridan Aquifer. It's not Floridian, that's the Floridan Aquifer. It is not just one big open tube under us. It's a series of caves, aquifers, kind of like, they always say, kind of like Swiss cheese under our feet, where the water gets through all the open porous spaces. When we use fertilizer, leaching can occur when more fertilizer is applied than the plants are capable of absorbing, or when heavy rains or overwatering causes the nutrients to travel right through that sandy soil and past the plant roots that you were trying to target and gets right into the aquifer. And just so you know, at Hernando County, Hernando County Utilities, 60% of the water that we distribute and that people pay us to use, 60% of it is used for irrigation purposes. When we're thinking of watering, we should only really water when our plants show signs of wilt. But be careful with that as well. We have what I call diva plants, such as azaleas, impatiens, other things like that tend to wilt due to heat stress in the middle of a hot afternoon in the summer. Don't believe them when they're wilting then. They're being divas and they're lying to you. Look at them in the morning. If they haven't popped back up, then possibly, yes, they need some water, and they may tell you then that the rest of the landscape would like some water too. I like to keep my irrigation system off. I don't keep it on automatic because we get so much rain in the summer. I barely ever put mine on. Maybe during a dry, very, very, very dry time, once or twice. But if it has rained in the past 24 hours, or if rain is forecast, there's no reason to have your irrigation system on. A rain sensor, like what is shown here, if it's working properly, you can set it for 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. That's all the water our lawn needs. When it has rained that much, this sensor sends a message to our system to not come on until the cork inside there dries out. Now these rain sensors, most people, if they even have one, they may have had it for a very long time, and UF has determined that most of them don't operate properly really after 3 years. So that's another thing you might want to test and see if it's still working. You can test it by trying to put it on in the middle of a pouring rain or right after it, or by holding a hose over it, getting it all wet, and then trying to turn it on. If it's not working properly, you want to consider changing it, getting a new one. Rain barrels. We have rain barrel workshops every month here at Hernando County Utilities. Every month except December, all year long. And this is what the rain barrel looks like. It helps contain the water to save it for the dry periods. Should help save money on your water bill, and it definitely helps stormwater runoff, at least 55 gallons at a time that's in your barrel. Here is our quiz for water efficiently. Number 1, true or false? Lawns can't survive on 1 day a week watering restrictions. Well, I've heard that. People have told me that. There's a particular community in our area that really a lot of people are believing that. But that is certainly false. We have a lot of lawns in Hernando County, and we certainly hope everyone is following the watering restrictions, and we still have lawns. They are able to survive on that 1 day a week watering restrictions. The community with the problems, they have a problem with take-all root rot. That is another issue, and Bill will talk to you about that. No amount of watering is going to save them from their take-all root rot. It is another issue. In fact, watering more will make it worse. So yes, lawns can certainly survive on 1 day a week watering restrictions. Number 2, on my watering day, I can water before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. Is that true or false? I want you to look very carefully at that. You may have some literature from us which tells you when your watering day is, what day of the week it is. So let me say that again. On my watering day, I can water before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. Some of you may have caught on already that that is false. Why is that false? Because of that little word after the 8 a.m. That is not an and. Should not be an and. The and makes it false. To make it true, that word would be or. You cannot water both times. You have to choose one or the other. So on your watering day, the times to water are before 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m. Florida Friendly Landscaping, of course, recommends as close to that 8 a.m. time frame as possible. Number 3, I have a well. So it doesn't matter how much I water, no one else is affected. Let me add to that that I don't have to follow county watering restrictions. That is false, and I've had people call me up who have been cited by code enforcement and have a pretty big citation, and they're very unhappy because they didn't know that they were on 1 day a week watering restrictions. They figured if they had a well, they had unlimited access to water, they could water all they want. That is false. People with individual wells, such as I have a well at my house, I'm under the same watering restrictions as those on municipal water systems. Every homeowner in Hernando County is under the same 1 day a week watering restrictions. Whether you have a well, whether you get your water from a lake, your irrigation water, whether you live in the city of Brooksville or Hernando County, you are a Hernando County Utilities customer, every single one of us waters 1 day a week or less. I don't water at all now, but we're all under those same restrictions. Pass that word on to your neighbors. Florida Friendly Landscaping Principle number 3. Fertilize appropriately. What is fertilizer? Fertilizer is any substance that contains one or more recognized plant nutrients, and it promotes plant growth or provides soil enrichment. We have commercial fertilizer, of course, that we're used to using, but if we use it at the wrong time of year, we're going to have a myriad of problems. Either we're going to get no growth response because the grass is semi-dormant and doesn't really have any roots, such as in the winter time. Or maybe conditions will be right in which we cause excessive growth when it should not be growing. So then all of a sudden we go from 85 degrees during the day to 2 days later we have a 21-degree night. All that tender new growth will be very susceptible to freezes and to frost damage. And fertilizing at the wrong time, it's a waste of our time, it's a waste of our money, it's a waste of our fertilizer. And where is that fertilizer going to end up? Either again down through that sandy porous soil into the aquifer, or washed away with the storm water where it will find its way to the nearest waterway. Here we see, as I said, leaching or runoff. It contributes to pollution of water resources. What should we do when we talk about fertilizing? Well, you will learn that in one of your classes. And so for now, you should follow UF-IFAS recommendations. Starting with a soil test is always the best way to go, because it can tell you what you already have in your soil and what you need to add. So there's no point adding something that you may already have plenty of. And Bill will teach you more about fertilizing and about how to obtain a soil sample. Florida Friendly Landscaping and UF recommend slow release nitrogen and low to no phosphorus. What does that mean? If we look at this bag here of fertilizer, we see it says 15-0-15. Every bag of fertilizer has to look the same as far as has to have certain things on it. And it does have to have those three numbers. And they do actually mean something. They stand for NPK: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So this bag says it has 15% nitrogen, 0% phosphorus, 15% potassium. Why do we want low to no phosphorus? Well, here in Hernando County, our main industry is lime rock. We mine the lime rock out and we sell it all over the country for roadbeds. Lime rock is very heavy in phosphorus. We have enough phosphorus in our soil. It would be a very rare occasion and a very strange microclimate if you happen to have an area that is in need of phosphorus. When you buy it, buy of course the correct amount so you have enough or not too much. You want to apply it evenly and properly. Drop spreaders tend to break apart some of the coatings that are on slow release fertilizers, and so then you destroy the slow release part of them. Florida Friendly Landscaping does not recommend the use of weed and feed products for several reasons. One thing, it doesn't fit in with our fertilizer ordinance time frame, which we will talk about that in a minute. But those are really two different applications that need to be done at two different times in Florida. Weeding needs to be done extremely early spring, and it's hard sometimes to know when is extremely early spring here. That might be mid-January, might be beginning of March. It's hard to tell, but you want to put down a pre-emergent before these weeds pop up, and that is before the time that you should and that you're allowed by ordinance to fertilize. Another problem people have found with weed and feed products is the herbicide in them can get to the roots of your trees and your shrubs and cause problems for them. In the summer, a lot of people think they want to add more nitrogen to green up their lawn. Nitrogen is not going to green up your lawn. All that it will do is make it grow more and make you have to mow more and do all of that work. So in the summer, if you're looking that you really would like it to be a little bit greener, there's no problem with getting a liquid iron, chelated iron or iron sulfate, and spray it on as a foliar spray to green up your lawn a little bit. If you have a fertilizer spill on a hard surface such as your driveway or the sidewalk, sweep it up and then distribute it back onto the turf to dispose of it. If you happen to spill a whole lot, then collect it up and put it back in the bag. The last thing you should do is rinse it away or down the street. Please do not let water touch your fertilizer that is on a hard surface. All that is going to do is cause more runoff, which takes more of those excess nutrients to our waterways. So always just sweep it off. Here is our Hernando County fertilizer ordinance. By ordinance, no homeowner is allowed to fertilize their lawn between January 1st and March 31st. As we said, the lawns are dormant at that time. They slough off most of their roots, so therefore they have nothing that is able to take up that fertilizer. And then the fertilizer goes down through the soil, gets into our aquifer, causes a problem there, or it'll just sit around and get washed away. A lot of our southern counties have a fertilizer ordinance during the summer months because they are concerned with stormwater runoff. We follow the advice of a turf expert from UF, Dr. Lori Trenholm, who indicated that even in the summer, even if we have a lot of rains, the lawns actively take up the fertilizer for use amongst the plants. In the winter, they don't. Therefore, more fertilizer is lost if you put it down in the winter than if you put it down in the summer. Now you will see professionals out there, and they are allowed to apply fertilizer if they have a special license from the state, and also they have to be registered with Hernando County, and they are allowed to apply slow release only. And there are other there's year-round compliance rules that can be followed, and you can stay on this slide or come back to it to read more about it. If you happen to have reclaimed water, which Hernando County doesn't, except for certain subdivisions for use for their common areas and their golf course, we don't have reclaimed or recycled water for the community at whole at this point yet. But you may have friends in Pasco who have some, and if we ever get some up here, that's what those purple pipes are, by the way. That is always going to be reclaimed water. Remember that the reclaimed water is going to contain nutrients and salts, including nitrogen, so you're going to have to adjust how you fertilize accordingly. Now, fertilize appropriately, true or false? If the home improvement store sells fertilizer during the blackout period, I can apply it to my yard. Well, I think we are all smart enough to know that that is false, but unfortunately our ordinance doesn't have enough teeth to prevent the stores from selling the fertilizer. So just because it's there doesn't mean it's okay to put it down in your yard. Between January 1st and March 31st, you cannot be putting down fertilizer on your lawn. Number 2, fertilizer spills should be washed down the storm drain. I sincerely hope you all said false to that one. And number 3, grass roots cannot take up fertilizer when the turf isn't actively growing. And that is true. The grass roots, they slough off to almost nothing during the winter, and so there's nothing there to take up that fertilizer when the turf isn't actively growing. It's okay if the turf turns straw-colored. That's just what it's going to do in the winter. There's nothing wrong with the turf, and it will come back in the spring. Thank you for listening to the first 3 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. In Module 2, we will cover the next 3, which will be mulch, attract wildlife, and manage yard pests responsibly.